There's obviously tons of injuries to the running back position right now. Seems like every week there's a new injury that pops up at the running back position. There's also some bye weeks, and there's also a lot of great matchups that are pushing a lot of running backs that I like up this list. So today, we're going into the top 30 running backs for Week 8 fantasy football, guys. So please go down there, please drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Let's go ahead and just dive right into it. So number one, I've got another guy sharing Christian McCaffrey's tier with him, and we'll get to him in a minute. Christian McCaffrey, I've got no fears, though, against the Cincinnati Bengals. Listen, this is going to be a really fun matchup to watch just as a football fan, I think. And obviously, people are going to be wondering, is Christian McCaffrey the true number one running back in fantasy football this week after a down week against the Minnesota Vikings? He still found the end zone. It wasn't a bad play, but it's not what we expect from a guy like Christian McCaffrey, who's giving us, as you can see on the screen, 22 plus fantasy points per game. It's ridiculous what he's been able to do. So I understand that argument, but at the same time, guys, don't forget, look at the numbers on the screen. He's averaging 5 yards a carry. He's averaging 18 attempts per game, and he really wasn't limited from a performance perspective on that Monday night game versus Minnesota. They limited his workload a little bit, but I think it comes back into full swing against Cincinnati this week. Number two, same tier. And this is a little bit of a statement ranking as well. I've got Austin Ekeler this week taking on the Chicago Bears. Listen, early this week, the most asked about question I have got, the most asked about guy has been Austin Ekeler. Should I trade Austin Ekeler? Should I bench Austin Ekeler this week? That's an unbelievable thought that's not out of line. Like, a couple weeks ago, could you imagine benching Austin Ekeler? Like, after week one, would you imagine benching if he was healthy? Last year, would you imagine that, right? Well, obviously, things change week to week in fantasy football, and we're all trying to make the best decisions possible for every matchup of the week to give ourselves the best chance to win. So, the Austin Ekeler concern is not out of line. I'm just here to reaffirm that Austin Ekeler is still a great player. Austin Ekeler, when you look at the numbers on the screen, obviously they've went down because the past 2 games have not been great from a fantasy football perspective. He's lost efficiency, and he's obviously not carrying the ball that much. So I understand the concerns about Austin Ekeler here. But just keep in mind, he's playing the Chicago Bears right now. Now, Chicago, they've rattled off a couple decent wins, but the Chargers this week, like, think about the teams the Chargers have played over the past 2 weeks. They played the Dallas Cowboys in Austin Ekeler's first game back. That's not a good matchup. And they also played the Kansas City Chiefs last week. Those are 2 tough matchups. The Chicago Bears are a massive break for Austin Ekeler. I have so much faith in him this week. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, and we'll move forward. This is a statement ranking right here that I feel so confident on. Please roll out Austin Ekeler with full confidence. Number 3, I love having him this high. Breece Hall this week taking on the New York Giants. And listen, there's a lot of reasons for this one, obviously. Number 1, obviously Breece Hall is now the clear running back 1 in New York. They're not messing around with Dalvin Cook anymore, as they shouldn't. The guy doesn't even look like he wants to be there. Number 2, you can see how efficient this guy is. 6.5 yards per carry on 11 carries per game. And that number's increasing, by the way. That number is going to continue to increase. Breece Hall has been fantastic in several games this year. And number 3, the matchup is tremendous. The matchup against the Giants, I want all in on this matchup. That's why he's this high. The Breece Hall matchup versus the Giants is the reason it's this high. If he was playing a team like the Rams, right, or even a team like the Bengals, or maybe even a team like the Chiefs, he wouldn't be this high. But of course, the Giants are a great matchup. I've got a lot of confidence in Breece this week. Fire him up. Number 4, Raheem Mostert making a return to the top 5, taking on the New England Patriots in Miami this week. Listen, last week I had Raheem Mostert down at running back 9, and a lot of people gave me flack for it, which I kind of found interesting. But Philadelphia is the best run defense team in the league. Like, period, end of story. Well, obviously, we're talking about this week, and he's coming off a bad week, so there's going to be natural questions, much like there will be with Austin Ekeler. Raheem Mostert's taking on a much different opponent this week. And in the first game versus New England this year, he went off for over 130 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. I've got no issues with Raheem Mostert here. We didn't see much from Jeff Wilson. I think we might see a little bit more from him this week, but it doesn't worry me. Raheem Mostert, to me, is another locked and loaded top 5 running back this week. Number 5, Travis Etienne taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh. Travis Etienne has been fantastic. You can see the numbers on the screen. 18 fantasy points per game. Dude is handling the workload. He's handling over 20 touches per game. Travis Etienne is just a locked and loaded running back, top 5 running back in fantasy football at this point. No questions about it. I don't care what the matchup is, and Pittsburgh's a little bit of a tougher matchup. I don't care. It doesn't matter with Travis Etienne. He's a top 5 running back in fantasy football, and I feel really good about talking about Travis Etienne, obviously, because I called this one from the get-go. Tank Bigsby is not a factor. Just had to say that really quick. Number 6, Tony Pollard this week. Tony Pollard is taking on the Los Angeles Rams in Dallas. Coming off the bye week, I think it's going to be a really good week for Tony Pollard. And Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, who played the Los Angeles Rams last week, both scored a touchdown in that game. Tony Pollard's better than both of them. There's no question about it. So, Tony Pollard, I get it. It's been a little bit disappointing at certain points, but you have to remember the opponents they've played. Dallas has played some stout opponents. This is not a stout defense they're playing. The Rams defense is not good. So, Tony Pollard, to me, is just right back in the conversation as far as top 5 running backs. I've got him behind Travis Etienne, Breece Hall this week because of matchup and because Travis Etienne's great, but Tony Pollard's a great option this week. Number 7, Isaiah Pacheco, man, taking on the Denver Broncos. Not only is the matchup great, it's the best matchup for a running back. Denver is dead last in the league as far as rushing yards allowed. So the matchup is great itself. Isaiah Pacheco has been fantastic in fantasy football. He's been great. So Isaiah Pacheco, I've got no questions on the guy. He was very close to having a down week last week, but he ended up getting in the end zone at the end of the game, which saved his week. But Isaiah Pacheco, to me, clearly their second best weapon on offense at this point behind Travis Kelce. His importance week to week is not going to fade. And that's something I didn't think I could say heading into the season. But it's the reality now, and we're living in today, and Isaiah Pacheco is their second best weapon. And that means he's very consistent every single week with his workload and opportunities. Number 8, Alvin Kamara. He's had a great season so far. Taking on the Indianapolis Colts in Indianapolis this week. Alvin Kamara has been fantastic. He has looked great again this year. Now, efficiency is still not great. 3.8 yards per carry is not efficient. He's almost averaging 10 targets per game. Now, obviously, a reason for that is because Derek Carr is just not playing very well, so he's checking the ball down a lot to Kamara. But Kamara's still running a lot of routes, and Kamara has been very good. Like, there's no question to me that Alvin Kamara is just simply just too important to this offense not to be inside the top 10 at this point. That's the ultimate thing here with Alvin Kamara, is the volume is consistent. And that's what we need to cling to here because he's not super efficient. With guys who lack efficiency, they need volume, and Alvin Kamara is getting that steadily. And they're taking on a Colts defense that's middle of the pack, basically. Alvin Kamara is going to continue to be great. Kenneth Walker at number 9. I love Kenneth Walker in fantasy. This is a little bit of a tougher matchup, though. He's taking on the Cleveland Browns. So the matchup is the reason Kenneth Walker's down here at almost number 10. And Kenneth Walker's been great in fantasy football. And in fact, last week he was excellent in real football. Didn't get in the end zone, though. So he had a little bit of a down game in fantasy football. But he had over 100 rushing yards. Kenneth Walker has been great this season. He's been absolutely fantastic. 16.4 fantasy points per game, and he's handling over 20 opportunities per game. So I've got no issues with Kenneth Walker here. Workload's there. Efficiency is there. Dude finds the end zone a lot. Matchup is just a little bit tougher this week, so keep it in mind, but you don't put Kenneth Walker on your bench regardless of the matchup. Number 10, DeAndre Swift of the Philadelphia Eagles, man. DeAndre Swift is taking on the Washington Commanders this week in Washington. So first thing to note here is that a couple weeks ago, Philadelphia played the Washington Commanders, and Washington put up way more of a fight than I thought they would. But Philadelphia won that game by scoring over 30 points. Like, Washington's defense is not good. So even if this game's close, I think DeAndre Swift's in for a great game. DeAndre Swift has been incredibly efficient on this Philadelphia Eagles offense. Over 5 yards per carry. This guy has been great, and he's averaging over 4 targets per game, which is something I did not think would happen before the start of the season. He's been fantastic in fantasy football. Again, can't bench the guy. I don't care what the matchup is. And the matchup's great this week. The only problem with DeAndre Swift is you can see that the attempts, the volume is not always consistent week to week. And that's why that number varies week to week. But DeAndre Swift is simply too explosive, too efficient not to have inside the top 10 on this kind of offense. Number 11 here, Saquon Barkley taking on the Jets. And honestly, guys, like, the matchup is so tough here, and the Giants offense sucks. So it's like, if Saquon Barkley wasn't 100% of this offense, he wouldn't be up this high. That's his ultimate problem here, and that's why he's lacking in efficiency, because teams know all we need to do is sell out to stop Saquon Barkley, and we're going to be fine. So he's always going to be the defense's primary focus here. The defense's problems are that he's just too good, and he's just too important. You can see he's averaging 23 opportunities per game with targets and attempts combined. Like, Saquon Barkley is the Giants offense. And that's the reason that he continues to be a very good fantasy option. But make no mistake, week to week, it's a little bit hard to tell what Saquon Barkley's fantasy output will be because he needs to find the end zone. Since he is not very efficient, he needs to find the end zone. And it might be tough against the Jets this week. Number 12, I know, Bijan Robinson of the Atlanta Falcons taking on the Tennessee Titans in Tennessee. So there's multiple layers to this. Number one, Tennessee's run defense is pretty good. They're in the top 12 of run defense this year. Number two, obviously, we're still waiting on official word on what Bijan's status is this week. So this is a very tentative ranking right here. This is assuming that he plays, right? So obviously, Bijan Robinson only had one carry against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in week 7 because of a headache. We didn't get much information on it, and that's a problem. So I don't know what the situation is. I don't know how severe it is. It was severe enough that on Saturday night when he was feeling it, he didn't feel any better on Sunday morning, and that's why they didn't play him. And I know they're getting investigated by the league. That's aside the point. The point is that if Bijan plays, I've got confidence in him. I don't have a problem with playing Bijan Robinson still. The guy is just too efficient. He's too explosive of a player. He's made too many big plays. He just needs opportunities. I get it. He's in a position right now where it's similar to where Jahmyr Gibbs was a couple weeks ago, and everybody was just furious with him. I understand it because the offense plays into this as well. Atlanta's offense is so frustrating in fantasy football. It's not even a question. But Bijan Robinson, to me, is just still locked and loaded as a top 12 to 15 running back because he's just simply too good of a player. And if he gets back, and if he's healthy, if he's ready to go, I have a hard time believing that he won't get at least 15 to 18 carries in this game. Number 13, Jonathan Taylor, taking on the New Orleans Saints. I called it. Jonathan Taylor had his breakout game against the New Orleans Saints. I guess I didn't call this one, but I did say at some point, Jonathan Taylor will have a breakout game when we least expect it. And it was against the Cleveland Browns defense of all defenses. So Jonathan Taylor's back. No question about that. And his volume continues to increase every single week. Now, with that being said, Zach Moss has not gone away. Like, he has not gone away. And honestly, it's kind of hard to see him going away at this point since he's been so effective for them. So they may just continue to run them both out. But Jonathan Taylor was great last week. He had a great rebound game, found the end zone finally, and the guy is still being involved. And it's coming along slowly, much like Josh Jacobs did at the beginning of the year, but he's actually just on a better trajectory. He's just a better player than Josh Jacobs is. Jonathan Taylor, to me, I'm ready to fire him back up without questions, and I can tell my audience that Jonathan Taylor is a great option in fantasy this week. Number 14, Jahmyr Gibbs, the Detroit Lions, taking on the Raiders. I called Jahmyr Gibbs a buy low trade target a couple weeks ago. I said, this is a great trade opportunity where you could buy a guy who was so severely overdrafted in the first place. His value came back to where it should have been. Go buy the guy at that value. And obviously, he had a great week last week. He got in the end zone finally, had a great fantasy game and a blowout loss. I think this is going to be a blowout win for the Detroit Lions. I think they're going to absolutely trounce the Las Vegas Raiders. Jahmyr Gibbs, to me, is a good option, and he's this high if Dave Montgomery doesn't play. If Montgomery plays, and we're filming on Tuesday night, so we don't have information yet, if he plays, he falls down in the rankings for sure, but if he doesn't play, Jahmyr Gibbs, full confidence in him. Roll him out this week. Derrick Henry at 15, taking on the Atlanta Falcons. So, Derrick Henry is just, like I've said with Derrick Henry for a long time now. The problem with Derrick Henry is that he's just not the player that he used to be. So what he needs to get real fantasy production from you is he needs volume. Well, the problem is, you can see it on the screen, 16 attempts per game is not bad, but that's not what he's used to. He used to get well over 20 attempts per game. That's the ultimate problem here. If he's not getting volume, he's not an elite player in fantasy football anymore. And you can see it. Fantasy points per game, way down compared to usual. So it's just a readjustment of where Derrick Henry is as a fantasy player these days. Still a good option, still a good running back 2 option, but he's not in the upper tier of guys like he always has been for the past several years and what we've grown to expect from him. James Cook at 16. I have not wavered off of James Cook. And they're taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense on Thursday night, which, by the way, Tampa Bay's defense has been pretty good this season. So I get it. Concerns with James Cook and the Buffalo Bills team and offense as a whole, I understand the concerns for sure. James Cook, to me, is the type of guy that is just so efficient, right? 4.8 yards per carry, and he's getting well over 13 yards per reception. The guy is super efficient. And that's why he continues to rank as high as he is in my running back rankings. I get it. Volume per week is always up in the air. Always, always, always. This team is scary because, as I've said over weeks, the Buffalo Bills are reverting back to what they used to be, which is way too dependent on Josh Allen. That's a problem for this team and the balance that they can't get and sustain at the running back position. But it's not because James Cook has not been good. The guy's been good for them when he's given the opportunity. Question always is, will he get it? I'm leaning on the side of yes, because Tampa Bay is dealing with injuries. And I do think that Tampa Bay will fall in a hole, which will have James Cook, the Buffalo Bills offense, able to run the ball more than they would have if Tampa Bay wasn't dealing with all these injuries. Josh Jacobs at 17, taking on the Detroit Lions. Josh Jacobs is just... he's just meh. Like, Josh Jacobs is not on the level he was last year. Efficiency is in the doghouse. I mean, he's not even averaging 3 yards a carry. This guy is just not efficient. The good thing is he does handle all the work. 16, almost 17 carries a game and almost 6 targets per game. The dude handles all the running back work. Volume is there. And obviously, if you don't have the efficiency, you need the volume. He's got that. So I don't have a problem with his workload. I just have a problem with the fact that he's not efficient and the fact that they're taking on a good defense that's going to be pissed coming into this game after getting embarrassed and bludgeoned by the Baltimore Ravens a week before in the Detroit Lions. So Josh Jacobs is fine, but he's not what he was last year. And you don't need me to tell you that. Number 18, I've got Kareem Hunt of the Cleveland Browns this week, taking on the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle this week. Honestly, I wanted to put Kareem Hunt higher than this. I really, really did. There's a couple reasons I didn't. So first of all, Kareem Hunt is just not the player he used to be. 3.2 yards per carry, and the guy's not even seeing 2 targets per game. So the volume hasn't been there. Of course, Jerome Ford has been the primary back, and that's a main reason why volume hasn't been there. But at the same time, when he has had his volume, really what saved him is getting in the end zone. That's why he's had productive fantasy weeks over the past several weeks. So that's what saved him. Obviously, the other part of it is Seattle's defense is a top 5 defense in rushing defense. They do not give up money rushing yards. So there's problems here, but obviously the upside is there with more opportunities coming his way this week. So I have excitement with Kareem Hunt. In fact, in a lot of situations, I'm telling you guys, telling my audience to play Kareem Hunt this week. I'm confident in doing it. I just want to caution that we don't go too over the top with Kareem Hunt because of what he's done in the past and what he's done over the past several weeks finding the end zone. Touchdowns are the most unpredictable stat to follow in fantasy football. Do not rely on touchdowns because if you take those away, the guy has not been efficient. So let's just pump the brakes a little bit here. Let's keep a level head, but Kareem Hunt is still a good option this week. Ramondre Stevenson at 19, taking on the Dolphins this week in Miami. So Ramondre, over the past several weeks, has had some decent games. Not anything great. Dude's not a great running back in fantasy this year. Just a reality. Efficiency's not there. The team sucks. And he's not getting many opportunities because they're always in a hole. Ramondre Stevenson has rebounded, though, and I predicted this because their schedule is lightened up. And Miami's not a slouch, right? Like, Miami's coming in off a loss to the Philadelphia Eagles where they kind of got a little bit embarrassed on Sunday night on a national stage where people were really thinking they'd compete with a Philadelphia Eagles team. And that game really wasn't all that competitive for very long. So I think Miami wins this game. But again, it is a divisional game. A lot of things could happen, a la seeing the New England Patriots beating the Buffalo Bills last week. So anything can happen here. Ramondre Stevenson remains a decent fantasy option because he's seeing the volume. Volume-wise, I think that he's worthy here as a back-end RB2. Joe Mixon at number 20, taking on the San Francisco 49ers defense. Listen, the 49ers defense has not been good. Like, their defense has actually been... They looked really bad on Monday night versus the Vikings. But the problem is not their run defense. There's not many teams running on the 49ers. They're a top 5 run defense in the league. The problem is their pass defense. So Joe Mixon can't be much higher than 20 because not only is the matchup tough, but he just hasn't been that good. Like, it's just a reality. Look at the numbers on the screen. He's not fooling anybody, right? Like, nobody's sitting there saying, I can't wait to play Joe Mixon this week. No, we're addressing reality here with this situation, and his reality is he hasn't been that good in fantasy this year. So, back in RB2, no, not much excitement playing him. 21, Dameon Pierce, the guy that a lot of people are trying to sell like hotcakes right now, taking on the Carolina Panthers in Carolina. So, that's really the main reason that he's up here at number 21. If he was playing a team like New Orleans or a team like Cincinnati, he would be back there like 27 probably for me. But I've said this over the weeks. I am not buying into the Devin Singletary takeover that a lot of people are buying into and that a lot of fantasy football YouTubers are telling you guys to buy into. So Dameon Pierce has not lost a ton of volume. Like, you look back to just week 5, Devin Singletary didn't log a single touch in that game. And then the following week, he has 13 carries, and fantasy football YouTubers are like, oh, it's the Devin Singletary takeover. It's not. I need to see way more to believe that this is the Devin Singletary takeover. I still think Dameon Pierce is their lead back, and I think they intend to have him be their lead back this week, and the matchup is obviously fantastic. So I'm making a call, a judgment call here on Dameon Pierce. I could end up really wrong on this one, or I could end up really right. That's the fun of fantasy football. We will see what happens. 22, Rachaad White taking on the Buffalo Bills on Thursday night. Rachaad White, to me, is just very similar to a James Cook, except James Cook's actually efficient. Rachaad White is not. Rachaad White, I called this out before the start of the season. He's just not an efficient player, and if he's not seeing the volume, and he isn't, you can see it on the screen, he's not that good of a fantasy player unless he finds the end zone. So Rachaad White, always going to be around this range for me. He's a very low-end running back 2, borderline high-end running back 3. But Rachaad White against this Buffalo defense, I do think there's a world where he could take advantage because Buffalo's defense is just, their team and their defense looks off. So there's a chance he could have a touchdown in this game, have a decent fantasy output, but just from a volume perspective, an efficiency perspective, it's just not working right now for Rachaad White. Number 23, like I said, I don't think Zach Moss is going away. I just don't. And they're taking on the Saints, right? Like, so you can look at Zach Moss's touches per game, and like, they're a little bit deceiving because of the spike that he had early in the season, but look at him last week. Dude had 18 carries. So like, it really hasn't went anywhere. And honestly, like I said with Jonathan Taylor, I don't think it's going to. He's been too effective for them to just say, we're putting you on the bench. Jonathan Taylor's back. Adios, amigo. Like, they're not going to do that. So I think Zach Moss is still a pretty good flex option at the running back position. I just think that Jonathan Taylor's a better option. I think we're just going to continue to see that over the weeks. 24, Tyler Algier. With or without Bijan Robinson here at 24. Taking on the Tennessee Titans. Listen, the reality is, if Tyler Algier is without Bijan Robinson, he handles the volume, right? Like, he's going to handle probably close to 20 touches in this game. The problem with him is he's just not very efficient. 3 yards per carry, basically, and the dude, he's just not an efficient player. That's the ultimate problem here. So you can't have him ranked high either way. If he does have Bijan Robinson, he drops maybe a couple spots, but probably not that many because just of the uncertainty. And even with Bijan Robinson over the past several weeks, he's been getting more volume again. So they're wanting to keep this a largely running back by committee group, which is going to keep Tyler Algier, in most cases, inside of my top 30 running backs. 25, Aaron Jones this week. Just bad. Taking on the Vikings this week. I mean, listen, Aaron Jones, like, it's been one of the biggest disappointments for me since week 1. I thought Aaron Jones was going to be a really good fantasy player this year. He's obviously not fully healthy, but either way, this offense is just bad. They're just bad. So, taking on the Vikings defense that looked way better than I thought they were against the San Francisco 49ers offense, I don't have a ton of confidence here with a guy who's getting barely 10 opportunities per game. It's just not there right now for Aaron Jones. I would say try to avoid him if you can. D'Onta Foreman, here at 26, taking on the Los Angeles Chargers. Here's the thing about D'Onta Foreman. If I could, and if Roschon Johnson, there wasn't a threat of him coming back this week, he would be higher. The Chargers defense is not good. The one thing they are good at, though, is they're pretty good at rushing yard allowance. They're not allowing too many rushing yards. They're in the top 10 in the league right now. So they're not exactly a bad run defense. And D'Onta Foreman's obviously coming off one of the games of his career, and he's done this several times over the years. I've discussed this on several different occasions. I went pretty deep into it on the live stream I did on Monday night. But D'Onta Foreman to me is just simply a guy that if Roschon Johnson plays, you can't have him ranked too high because the uncertainty of the volume. And it looks like Roschon Johnson will be back this week. Without Roschon Johnson, he will definitely rise up, but I am assuming that Roschon plays since he has missed 2 games with a concussion already, and it already looks all signs point to him coming back this week. Alexander Mattison at 27 this week, taking on the Packers. I would have loved to put him higher than this. I really would have. Green Bay's defense, not good and not healthy either. So I would have loved to do it, but Alexander Mattison is just like, he's so uninspiring. Like, numbers on the screen back up what I'm saying. Like, not efficient, not handling the workload. Very similar to Rachaad White. He's just a very similar player. So, just uninspiring. Not a single rushing touchdown this year. Yeah, gross. Brian Robinson at 28 probably feels low to people, and I'm expecting pushback for this one, and that's okay. They're taking on the Philadelphia Eagles this week in Washington. Listen, I get it. Brian Robinson, the first time against the Eagles, not exactly a bad week. Like, they put up points against the Eagles. The Eagles have the best rushing defense in the league. Do I think it's going to happen again? No, I don't. I don't think it's going to happen again. Washington's offense, the way they've been playing over the past several weeks, I can't imagine that Brian Robinson is going to be any sort of relevance this week as far as fantasy football performance goes, because again, very similarly in the class of Alexander Mattison and Rachaad White, he's not getting the volume and he's not efficient. Bad combination here. Scored most of those touchdowns early in the season. It's not happening right now. Maybe it does. Dude's always going to be a touchdown threat if they get at the goal line because he runs hard, but he's just simply not going to be good enough, in my opinion, against the Philadelphia Eagles defense. 29, Javonte Williams. Again, still uninspiring, and he's playing the Chiefs this week. It's uninspiring, but he did have a little bit of a bounce-back game last week, and he handled the majority of the work. So, I think Javonte Williams is a decent dart throw to have at your flex position right now, but again, very uninspired to play Javonte Williams. Just want to put that out there. Number 30, Gus Edwards this week. Gus Edwards taking on the Arizona Cardinals. Again, same story every week. It's literally the exact same. 12 to 15 carries for him, and every other week he gets a touchdown. Basically how it goes. He scored a touchdown last week, but he is playing the Arizona Cardinals, and Lamar Jackson is 16-1 versus the NFC. They're going to kill the Cardinals this week. So I think Gus Edwards does have a decent chance of finding the end zone again, because I think there's going to be a lot of points scored from the Baltimore Ravens. And as we do every single week at the end of every ranking video, I give you my running back underdog flex option of the week. And honestly, I'll be honest here, this has been an uninspiring week for me to pick this one. I don't have a lot of confidence in any of my options. I elected to go with Chuba Hubbard here of the Carolina Panthers taking on the Houston Texans. Listen, like I said, I'm not going to try to sugarcoat this and act like I have any sort of excitement for this at all. My thing is, Chuba Hubbard, when he's played, has been better than Miles Sanders. Just from a statistical standpoint and on the field, just looks more explosive. So, Chuba Hubbard, if he gets the opportunity with a still hobbled Miles Sanders, I still think that Chuba Hubbard could pop off for a big play or two in a matchup where they're probably going to be down to Houston for the majority of this game. So they're going to have to take shots anyways. This is a dart throw that is the best of the bunch to me, that has the highest upside, but again, very uninspiring this week on my underdog running back flex option of the week. So let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below and what questions you need answered for Week 8 Fantasy Football. And if you want to see the top 30 wide receiver rankings for Week 8 Fantasy Football, click on this video right here.